Hello there and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Al24 News streaming live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our news program. In the 80th day of the Russian military operation in Ukraine, fighting raged and missile strikes hit outside Kiev, with Russian forces appearing to make fresh progress in their slow advance toward the capital. Russian missile strike on Ukraine base close to Polish border reportedly killed 20. This bombing close to Lviv follows Kremlin warning that supply lines were legitimate targets. A senior Russian Defense Ministry official said on Saturday that the humanitarian situation in Ukraine was steadily worsening, blaming the actions of Ukrainian fighters. Starting our news bulletin with the latest updates over the Russian military operation in Ukraine. 9 people have been killed in Lviv after airstrikes at NATO-linked base in close to Ukraine's border with Poland. Ukrainian President Zelensky warns invaders are trying to turn Kherson into a brickway region. People in Kiev are scrambling to escape with the bulk of Russian ground forces about 25 kilometers from the center of the Ukrainian capital. Mayor of Mariupol says 12 days of Russian bombardments have killed 1,500 people in besieged port city. Challenge continues. The United States has said it would rush up to $200 million in additional small arms, anti-tanks and anti-aircraft weapons to Ukraine. Russia has said its troops could target supplies of Western weapons in Ukraine. During a speech on the 70th day of the Russian military operation in Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky warned against forming pseudo republics, adding that Ukraine will resist this challenge. Let's hear it.
The occupiers from Kherson region are trying to repeat the sad experience of forming pseudo-republics. Local officials are blackmailed, legislators are pressured. They are looking for someone to bribe to organize the so-called KPR, Kherson People's Republic. Following the attack on our country, Ukraine, the Russian leadership is transforming its region into something similar to the so-called DPR and LPR, into a vast area isolated from the rest of the world, where poverty will reign, where everything will be determined only by violence, and where people will flee from.
Fighting rages near Kiev as conditions worsen in other major Ukrainian cities, and the Russian bombardments. Fighting intensified on the outskirts of the city as air raid sirens were sounded in almost all regions of Ukraine on Saturday. The cities of Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy and Mariupol remain surrounded and are under heavy Russian bombardments. On Saturday, Russian soldiers increased the pressure on Kiev and shelled civilian areas in other Ukrainian towns, despite renewed efforts to send relief to Mariupol, the destroyed port city. Both Ukrainian and Russian authorities labeled the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian situation as catastrophic. Sufyan Control on Watch Follow.
Russian forces upped the pressure on Kiev Saturday and pummeled civilian appears in other Ukrainian cities, amid fresh efforts to deliver aid to the devastated port city of Mariupol. Both Ukrainian and Russian officials on Saturday described the quickly worsening humanitarian situation as catastrophic. Meanwhile, Russian Defense Ministry spokesperson called strike on Wednesday targeted the maternity hospital and pediatric hospital in the beleaguered city of Mariupol in southeastern Ukraine, staged by Ukrainian nationalists.
The Russian Air Force carried out absolutely no missions aimed at hitting ground targets in the Mariupol region. The analysis of the statements of the representatives of the nationalist regime in Kyiv, the photographic material of the hospital, leaves no doubt the airstrike that alleged took place in a completely staged provocation to fuel an anti-Russian hype aimed at Western audience.
The northwest suburbs of the capital, including Irpin and Busha, have endured days of heavy shellings while Russian armored vehicles advancing on the city's northeastern edge. Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said the capital, described by a senior Ukrainian official Friday as a city under siege, was reinforcing defenses and stockpiling food and medicine.
According to the governor of the Lviv area, Russia has intensified its military operation in Ukraine by striking a key military base near the Polish border, killing at least 35 people and wounded 134 more. The operation occurred just hours after the Kremlin issued a warning that Western supply lines into the besieged country were legitimate targets. On Sunday, large explosions were heard at the base in Yavoriv, a military city about 10 kilometers from the Polish border. At 5:45 a.m., a missile strike was launched. Russian strikes hit near airport in western Ukraine on Friday as the military operation annulled, and the Russian troops kept the pressure on the capital Kiev and besieged port city of Mariupol. The airstrikes on the Lutsk military airfield left 2 Ukrainian servicemen dead and 6 people wounded. The strikes also targeted an airport near Ivano-Frankivsk, where residents were ordered to shelters after an air raid alert. The port city of Mykolaiv, located in the southern of Ukraine near Odessa, was shelled persistently overnight from Friday to Saturday, with the shots hitting an oncology hospital and an eye hospital. No fatalities were reported, as the former stopped keeping patients overnight since the start of the Russian military operation in Ukraine. The hospital moved all of its patients to its basement for the night. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said at a press conference in Kiev that about 1,300 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed since the start of this Russian military operation on February 24th. Let's hear it.
About 1,300 soldiers are dead in our country right now, and in Russia more than 12,000. I'm not happy that 12,000 of them died. It's not my view of the world. They have parents. They were sent, and most of them do not know where they have been sent. They know nothing.
Russian Ministry of Defense Mikhail Zientistivs believe that humanitarian situation is worsening in Ukraine, which is facing an offensive by forces from Moscow, and that is catastrophic in certain cities.
The situation in Ukraine, unfortunately, continues to deteriorate rapidly in some cities. It has reached catastrophic proportion. Armed formations of nationalists are mining residential areas, destroying bridges and roads, and destroying survival facilities. As a result of these criminal and treacherous actions by the Ukrainian authorities, mainly towards their own people, the civilian population is forced to survive in inhuman conditions. Without heat, without electricity, without water supply, without food or medication. The most serious humanitarian situation has developed in Mariupol. Hundreds of thousands of people, including foreigners, are forcibly detained by nationalists who, threatening physical violence, stop any attempt to leave the city.
Russian senior diplomat warned that his country is against the US and NATO military supply to Ukraine and stated that Russian forces will consider the convoys as legitimate targets, announcing that pumping weapons from a number of countries is really a dangerous move. Usama Yadin, what follow?
A senior Russian diplomat has warned that Moscow could target Western shipments of military equipment to Ukraine amid the fierce fighting which is taking place on Ukrainian borders and around the capital Kiev. Speaking Saturday, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said that Moscow has warned the US that his country would see the deliveries of Western weapons to Ukraine as targets. Ryabkov said Russia warned the US that pumping weapons from a number of countries it orchestrates isn't just a dangerous move. It's an action that makes those convoys legitimate targets for the Russian forces which are advancing towards the capital.
We warned the United States that pumping Ukraine with weapons from a number of countries orchestrated by them is not just a dangerous move, but an action that turns the corresponding convoys into legitimate targets.
Ryabkov also denounced the U.S. sanctions against Moscow as an unprecedented attempt to deal a serious blow to various sectors of the Russian economy, but noted that Moscow will act in a measured way to avoid hurting itself. U.S. President Joe Biden authorized the Secretary of State to provide up to $200 million in defense aid to assist Ukraine. It's not just weapons. The U.S. also to teach Ukrainians how to use them through military education. Russia's 64-kilometer convoy dispersed yesterday, but today it re-emerged in a far more frightening position, just 25 kilometers from the capital, Kyiv.
Ukraine has accused Russian forces of bombing a psychiatric institution near the town of Izium in eastern Ukraine, but emergency services said that no one was injured. Ukraine's State Emergency Service stated in a statement that at the time of hit, all 30 employees and 330 patients were in a bomb shelter. The UK government believes into group faces unique threats from Russia, with some members facing aggression on the land borders, in the skies and from the North Sea and Baltic Sea, and many faces increasing cyber threats too. UK Prime Minister will meet with leaders of Nordic and Baltic nations of the two-day meeting aimed at defending them from Russian military operation. Boris Johnson will hold meetings with leaders and representatives from their nations, and on Tuesday he will hold talks in Downing Street. The International Atomic Agency released a statement by Director General Rafael Grossi on Saturday. It said that Ukraine informed the Atomic Agency that Russia was planning to take full permanent control of the nuclear plant. National Nuclear Agency generating company of Ukraine told the agency that around 400 Russian soldiers were present full-time on site, and confirmed that the plant remains under the control of the Russian military forces commander. Hundreds of protesters took the streets in major cities around the world, carrying Ukraine flags, chanting "Close the skies" in support of Ukraine with the Russian forces over the territory. Zara Ferjani on Watch Follow.
People gathered in major cities around the world to demonstrate against Russia's military operation in Ukraine and to demand an end to the conflict. In Times Square, New York City, dozens of demonstrators, mostly Ukrainians, gathered in the snow to demand the closure of their country's airspace and more help from the international community.
Our fellow Ukrainians, they are suffering of those missile strikes and airplane flying over our cities and killing innocent people, bombing maternity house.
Innocent people are dying. It's just insane. And I want, with my messages, I want the bombs to stop.
In Florence, thousands of people gathered in front of the Basilica of Santa Croce to support the Ukrainians in their crisis. The protest was part of a European-wide anti-war initiative called #CitiesWithUkraine.
We came here today because as individual citizens we cannot do much. What we can do is support the Ukrainian citizens who are struggling and suffering thanks to our presence. Then the states, the institutions will have to do more, and I hope they can do more.
In France, several hundred people gathered in Place de la République in Paris. Being together is a weapon, denouncing the war in Ukraine.
We must close the sky. It's essential because civilians are dying. They bomb anyhow. They bomb hospitals, maternity wards, schools, private homes. Everything.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky intervened by video conference during the demonstration to denounce the Russian bombardment in his country. Accusing Russia of killing children and destroying hospitals, he described the act as hatred for every living being.
This week, Health Partners International of Canada announced its commitment to ongoing relief efforts in Ukraine throughout 2022. An official said that the situation in Ukraine will have long-term effects, and we anticipate that the Ukrainian people will continue to need support and aid throughout 2022. Health Partners International of Canada planned response involves sending 400 humanitarian medical kits, a total of 240,000 treatments valued at $2.4 million to Ukraine and neighboring refugee settlements throughout the remainder of the year. The UN said on Saturday that the number of refugees fleeing Ukraine since the Russian military operation 2 weeks ago is now nearly 2.6 million. In the latest update on Saturday afternoon, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees said that there were over 2 million refugees who had fled Ukraine so far, and an estimation by the UN Refugee Agency predicts that 4 million people could leave Ukraine, a figure which will likely be revised later on. Washington scrambled to replace Russian oil and gas imports, which banned over Moscow's military operation in Ukraine in a bid to shock over revenue for President Vladimir Putin by Venezuelan oil. However, it seems that Venezuela will not be able to replace it, as experts predict. Miriam Zian.
The site of this abandoned oil platform off the coast of Lake Maracaibo reflects the state of the oil sector in a country with the largest reserves of crude oil in the world, once dubbed Venezuela Saudi Arabia. Oil facilities have stopped producing, and their deteriorated state undermines American attempts to make Venezuela an alternative to Russian oil, which was banned by the White House amidst the Ukrainian crisis, hoping to deprive Moscow of revenue. However, experts don't expect Venezuela to become an alternative.
Maduro debe entender.
Maduro needs to understand that when Russia is sanctioned, its oil, which is abundant and good, will now go to the same market where Maduro sends his 500 of the 750,000 barrels a day. What does that mean? Putin is perhaps a very good friend of Maduro, but that today he will be his most aggressive competitor in the same market.
Not far from the place, José Antonio Puerto La Cruz refinery is located, where the scene is not much different. The country's main oil facility is still hostage to an old system in processing and filtering, as shown by the black plumes of smoke emanating from it as a result of burning gas, and the industry is struggling to satisfy its own domestic demand and commitments to other countries.
Venezuela is not an option. For it to be one, it must have the capacity of increase its production.
Experts say Venezuela needs millions of dollars in foreign investment, a change to hydrocarbon laws, legal protections, and sanctions easing to restore the industry.
Sport now. Roman Abramovich has been disqualified by the Premier League from owning Chelsea after having sanctions imposed on him by the UK government following the Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. The league's decision to bar Abramovich from being a director of Chelsea and in fact forces him to push ahead with his sale of the club. It came 2 days after the government imposed sanctions on the oligarch and granted the Stamford Bridge the club license that allows them to keep operating under heavy restrictions. Hyundai, meanwhile, has become the latest company to suspend its association with Chelsea. The Korean car maker signed a 5-year sleeve sponsorship deal in 2018, but said, in the current circumstances, we have suspended our marketing and communication activities with the club until further notice. The Egyptian international squash player Ali Faraj answers the media while asked about his opinion about the Ukrainian conflict, calling out double standards on Ukraine coverage from the world's media and sports organizations, saying, "We have never been allowed to speak about politics in sports, but all of a sudden now it's allowed. If we can talk about Ukraine, we can talk about Palestine."
But we've all seen what's going on in the world at the moment with Ukraine, and nobody's happy with what's going. Nobody should ever accept any killings in the world, any oppression. But we've never been allowed to speak about politics in sports. But all of a sudden now it's allowed. So that we're allowed. I hope that people also look at the oppression everywhere in the world. I mean, the Palestinians have been going through that for the past 74 years, But I guess because it doesn't fit the narrative of the media of the West, we couldn't talk about it. But now that we can talk about the Ukraine, we can talk about Palestinians. So please keep that in mind. Thank you very much.
Well said, Ali. This is the ugly truth. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder of our main top stories. Fighting raged and missile strikes hit outside Kiev, with Russian forces appearing to make fresh progress in their slow advance on the capital. Russian missile strike on Ukraine base close to Polish border reportedly killed 20, and this bombing close to Lviv follows Kremlin warnings that supply lines were legitimate targets. A senior Russian defense ministry official said on Saturday that the humanitarian situation in Ukraine was steadily worsening, blaming the action of Ukrainian fighters. That's all the news we have got for now. So, have a blessed evening and see you.